Hey guys, tonight we're going to be doing a little blind test between the Canon EOS RP and the Google Pixel 4. I've had on my radar a long time this desire to try out Google's night sight and to compare it to what I'm used to getting at night with a full frame mirrorless camera, just to see how they compare. I've heard good things about the night sight and I really just want to see what I can get. And as fate would have it, this guy showed up in the mail the other day. This is the Google Pixel 4 as a gift from Google. Thank you, Google. And I thought, what an opportune time. I know that this with this device, night sight has really been improved. It's come a long way, and from what I understand, it really is the best computational photography implementation of night photography that we have. The Google Pixel has two lenses, 27mm equivalent 1.7 aperture lens employing a small 12 megapixel CMOS sensor, and then also a 44mm equivalent lens which rocks a 12 megapixel sensor. And the way that night sight works is that when you hold it really still and take a photo, it'll take a burst of a bunch of photos and computationally kind of put all those together to get less noise out of an image, more detail out of the shadows. So how does that compare at these tiny lenses and sensors and computational photography? How does that compare to our Canon RP? Now, the Canon RP, I know, is not the best low light full frame camera on the market, but that's fine. I don't really want to compare the very, very best that full frame has to offer on the market. A consumer camera, probably one of the most affordable consumer full frame cameras, will do just fine for this test. So like my other blind tests, I'll show you some shots side by side with both cameras. I won't tell you which is which until the end, where I'll reveal the truth to you, and you can decide whether to be horribly disappointed or completely vindicated in what you think you're going to prefer. So we're going to head to the industrial side of town, see what we can see, take some shots. But honestly, guys, I have no idea what to expect from this test. But either way, I think it'll be fun. By the way, I'm doing all of these shots handheld. I could use a tripod, but at night it's nice to be a little bit more inconspicuous and just run and gun it a little bit more. And the Google Night Sight is awesome because it will stitch together photos even if you move slightly. So at least that's the claim. So we'll see how it does compared to handheld Canon EOS RP, which I do have a cage to lend a little bit of stability, make things a little more fair, I guess, for the EOS RP. We'll see how it goes. This next shot will be a really good test. We're at ISO 12,800 on this video camera here, so I suspect that's about what I'll have to be shooting at on the Canon to get this. I do have to say though, one of my favorite types of photography is night photography for so many reasons. If you ever get tired of your town, if you just feel like there's nothing else to shoot, you've shot everything in your local place of residence, try going out in the middle of the night. It's kind of like the upside down in Stranger Things, right? Everything is sort of opposite. Shots that you would never have thought would work during the day, work at night. And not only that, but it's so much more peaceful and contemplative. There really is no rush or urgency to chase a shot before the light changes. and nobody around to really interfere with what you're doing. You can take your time, slow down, and just enjoy it.
It's as easy as that. Just aim, focus, snap. It's as easy as that.
All right, I'm back in the studio now, and it is time for the big reveal. The Google Pixel 4 was A, and the Canon EOS RP was B. So what did you think, and what were your impressions? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As for me, as I study these photos, I think there are a lot of interesting takeaways here. And the first and most obvious takeaway is that the shots from the Google Pixel are without a doubt significantly less noisy. It doesn't mean they are better in every situation, but they are unquestionably better and more usable in extremely low light conditions. Getting properly exposed images with the Google Pixel 4 and Night Sight is amazingly impressive. With the EOS RP, you'll have to balance how high you're willing to go with the ISO and the resulting noise that will bring to your image versus how low you think you'll be able to go on the shutter speed without introducing motion blur. Add to that the dynamic of needing fast and expensive lenses, preferably with fast aperture and image stabilization, and it makes shooting with a mirrorless camera, handheld in low light, a much more complicated prospect as compared to the very simple point, hold still, and shoot process you get with the Pixel 4 and Night Sight. Beyond that, in extremely low light conditions with a camera like this, if you don't have a tripod, you'll probably just have to shrug your shoulders and walk away from a lot of shots because you aren't going to get a shot that will work. Whereas with Night Sight, you could confidently pull it out and take that picture, knowing you'll be able to get a properly exposed, albeit perhaps soft, photo. Another thing that is either very nice or very unhelpful, depending on your perspective and workflow, is how much Night Sight magic you want to bring to bear to bring the shadowy areas back into exposure on the Pixel 4. Since the phone needs to balance how long to make each individual exposure, also how many exposures to make, it's very important for the phone to know ahead of time how much of the shadows you want to expose for. Even if you manipulate the phone's raw files later in Lightroom, you'll never really be able to recover the shadows like you could if you were doing it in camera with Night Sight. So you pretty much have to get that right in camera. Again, depending on who you are, this could be something that you appreciate or hate. But either way, if you get it wrong, there's no real going back in post, even if you shoot in RAW on this phone, like with the photo I'm going to show you now, where I totally overdid the effect and I don't like it. And while we're on the topic of getting it right in camera versus editing it later in post, I should also mention one drawback of the Pixel 4 with Night Sight, and that is white balance algorithm. Google relies on machine learning to develop their auto white balancing algorithms, and while it seems plenty reliable in daylight from what I've seen so far, at night it's not excellent, and I would prefer to be able to adjust it to taste. It's frustrating that you can't edit the white balance in camera, and that gives you a disconnect in the workflow where you're working with the exposure and the dynamic range in camera, but you have to shoot in RAW and then edit the file more in post to edit the white balance later. It would have been nice to eliminate that post-production step entirely since we're already doing so much in camera anyway. Now, when it comes to comparing sharpness, things are a bit tricky here, and it largely depends on how much darkness we're shooting in. My technique when it comes to shooting with a mirrorless camera, or a DSLR camera for that matter, in low light, is to go as low as I dare with the shutter speed and then shoot in short continuous bursts. That way I can choose the sharpest shot in post later. And with that technique and comparing it to the Pixel 4 shots, I do feel like the EOS RP shots are technically sharper, but in really low light, that high ISO noise negates any of that perceived sharpness. So even though the Pixel is combining stacked handheld images with softer results, it still appears sharper at normal magnifications because it's clear of noise. Of course, one thing you will not be able to get with Night Sight, or at least not yet, is that computational shallow depth of field that you can get in Pixel's portrait mode. Shooting wide open with a full frame camera in low light will give you some of that subject isolation that you may want, although it could be a disadvantage to the full frame camera if you want the whole photo sharp front to back. With that wider depth of field on the Pixel 4, it's easier to get that, where without a tripod, you just won't be able to stop down far enough on full frame camera to get that same wide depth of field, at least not in low light. So those are my main takeaways, but I do need to mention one other strange thing I noticed in this shot with the Google Pixel 4, and that was this strange ghosting of the open sign light flare. I have no idea what caused that in this photo. If anyone has any ideas, please let me know. In the meantime, I can only assume it's a ghost in the machine. So when it comes to just getting a properly exposed shot with low noise in extremely low light, or just being able to recover extremely dark shadows handheld, the Pixel 4 with night sight wins. No question. You get full control over dynamic range and can bring back the shadows as you shoot as much as you want. And if you often want to shoot with a wide depth of field, you'll have an advantage here. But you do sacrifice control over white balance, and sometimes what the computer picks for you isn't great. You also lose the ability to get shallow depth of field if you ever require that. If you don't mind using a tripod, you will get unquestionably better results with a full frame camera with better fine-tuned control. However, you will be required to bracket exposures and combine images to get that same level of dynamic range that you can get computationally with the Google Pixel 4 night sight. I guess that's the biggest takeaway, and that is that smartphones are making more progress when it comes to computational photography out of necessity, and the mirrorless camera manufacturers are getting lazy. They need to step up the game and bring to the software on these cameras the software that phone manufacturers are bringing to bear to stay relevant. But that's all I've got for you today, guys. Remember, as always, kindness before cameras, and we'll talk to you again real soon.